Hey everyone, this is Pete from MyJewelryBench.com. Today what I want to talk to you about are the tools that I recommend if you're breaking into the watch service hobby and it's something that you want to get into. I'm going to recommend all the tools that I use on a daily basis. Well, not all the tools, but the minimum amount of tools that you should have when you're starting out to do watch repair. Now, some of the links below in the description box, you'll see our affiliate links from Amazon. I do make a small, tiny, very, very tiny little commission from those. Other links will be links to suppliers where I make no profit from or I am not sponsored from. They are just recommended sites that I do business with. I hope you enjoyed this video and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your workbench. Now, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on a workbench. You could work at a desk, but you do need to keep your elbows about chest high. So you'll notice that jewelers' benches and watchmaker benches, they typically are the tops of them about chest high when you're sitting on a standard chair. And a good adjustable chair is always a must. The second thing you're going to need is a good light. Now, I typically recommend LED lights. LED lights seem to illuminate a lot better. They're also cheaper to run these days. And when you're using them, they'll give off a much more natural light to work from. Having good light when you're working with small parts is very, very important. So keep that in mind. Another thing you're going to want is a good micrometer. Now, a good digital micrometer is a must when working with either jewelry or watchmaking because it's always good to have on hand to measure small parts. Also, I use a very good hand blower. You're going to need a good hand blower to blow off any dust or debris that's on a watch or a watch dial. It's always a good thing to keep right on your bench. And I always recommend Rotico to dab the watch movements of debris and dust because it doesn't leave that much of it doesn't leave any residue on your tools or your working material. Another thing to have is a good magnetizer or demagnetizer. You're always going to want to demagnetize any parts or watch movements. Some of the things you're also going to want to have are tools, and these tools are going to be either in the form of toolkits or you can buy them separately. You can get starter kits. These kits are available just about everywhere. Again, I'll have links to these in the description below, and you can link to those on Amazon or at other sources to get those. These toolkits usually come with just about everything you'll need to get started. Now, they're not going to be high quality tools, but they will get you going. Another must are parts trays. You're going to want parts trays whether you're working with pocket watches or wristwatches, new or old, because you're going to need a way to organize and sort out your parts. Now, I typically use those longer flat trays. I don't use these round ones much anymore because most of the watches I work on have so many parts that they need to be separated in groups and categories, and that's always a good thing to have. In addition to that, you'll want a good bench pad. Bench pads are important, and you'll notice on my videos that I always work on a bench pad or some kind of a watch pad. And what that does is it allows me to make sure that when parts fall, because they're going to fall off your tweezers or come apart from the watch, when they hit the pad, they won't bounce around and maybe fall on the floor. They're going to hit that pad. That pad's going to soften them up, and your parts are going to lay on top of that pad. Plus, it's a good thing to just keep handy when you're working on things, because if you push down on something, that pad is about 1/4 of an inch thick. It's kind of like a giant mouse pad, the one that I work with, and it's very soft. It won't do damage to the watch or watches that you're working on. So right here, the tweezers that I use, these are titanium tweezers, but you can use stainless steel. Anything non-magnetic is very important to use. They come in different styles. The first set of 4 was the most common that you'll use. Now this set's a little more detailed. It has a lot of different varieties of tweezer tips. These can be used for a lot of different things. But the set of tweezers that you purchase, and I do recommend non-magnetic tweezers and a very high quality material, are a must for anybody working on watches, or especially the hobbyist who's just getting started. Another major tool that you're going to have to invest a little money in as you get further into your hobby is going to be a good set of screwdrivers. Now, screwdrivers come in a variety of different flavors, and I can't stress to you more than tweezers how important the screwdrivers are going to be to your workflow. Having a good set of high-quality tweezers is a must when working on watches. Now, you can buy replacement blades. Most very good screwdrivers will always take replacement blades, and those blades should be of high quality. You're also going to want a way to sharpen them because they will dull out or chip over time, so keep that in mind. But the screwdriver investment that you make is going to be important. I use a set of Burgeon screwdrivers, and they've lasted me 25 years, and I love them. I use them every single day, probably hours a day. And the investment you make in a tool like that is something that you just can't put a price on. So I would recommend that if you're going to get into this hobby and do it seriously, that eventually you buy yourself a very high quality set of screwdrivers. Now you'll notice this video is not in any particular order, but if you're working with replacing crystals on watches, especially older watches or pocket watches, you're going to want a good kind of crystal cement. Now GS is very good, or you could use a UV curing epoxy that is going to be much more durable and last longer. I would recommend that if you're going to dabble into changing crystals on older watches, that you get yourself some at least GS cement, because you're going to need it. On most newer watches, however, you'll find that they use nylon gaskets to hold in the crystals. Every now and then you're going to come across an older watch or a watch that's been damaged by water, and it's going to get a little rusty. And the way that we get rust off of a watch is typically with either nylon brushes or fiberglass brushes. And I would recommend you getting a set of those. You can get those through my Amazon tools link in the link below. And those come in very handy to rub off the rust or corrosion on a watch movement without doing any damage to the movement. Now, I would probably recommend getting just the fiberglass brushes, but if you want a whole set of 4, they come in both steel, brass, nylon, and fiberglass. But you will go through the fiberglass ones if you're going to deal with like corrosion on a watch or rust removal. And remember that if you're using a fiberglass brush, that's going to leave a whole lot of debris on the watch after you've kind of rubbed off all that debris, corrosion, and rust. So you're going to have to clean the parts afterwards. The next thing we'll talk about is watch holders. Now, these metal watch holders you can get for really cheap, under $7 or $8 from supply houses or on Amazon, even from eBay. I also use these plastic cup holders that typically hold larger movements like pocket watches, and you'll see me often using these when I'm working on an old antique pocket watch. They don't typically work with like rectangular movements. For those, I'll sometimes use a mouse, or not a mouse pad, but either my bench pad or a padded holder. And those padded holders come with either holes in the middle, or if you're lucky enough to have several of them, I have some with and without holes in them, because that way the cannon pinions, hour wheels, secondhand posts can poke through those holes while you're working on the watch. Movement holders are important because they kind of hold the movement firm while you're working on it, and it allows you to have a kind of a different grip on it while you're working on the watch movement. Also, some holders come in handy to hold a movement in place when you're trying to open them, or even this style, even when you're working on a movement, sometimes that's convenient to work with. So if you're breaking into the watch repair hobby and you want to start changing mainsprings, there are older style winders that you can typically get on eBay that allow you to wind up mainsprings for pocket watches. Most wristwatches today, when they ship the new mainsprings, they come in a holder that'll actually press into the barrel. So you typically don't necessarily need to have a mainspring winder. But if the mainspring pops out of the barrel, you're going to definitely want the right size winder. You can buy mainspring winders in a variety of sizes. They are very expensive, so keep that in mind. So here's an example of, this is a Rolex mainspring, and you can see it comes in the retention ring, and then I can just press that into place directly into the barrel. And if you're good enough to do that, you won't necessarily need a mainspring winder. Just make sure that you put it in the correct way. Whether it winds up counterclockwise or clockwise, always make note of that. Mainspring winders come in dimensional sizes, so they will fit the size of the barrel. The winder actually inserts into the barrel, and you can buy the winders with the little handle to wind them up. And that's a convenient thing because you can buy them individually or you can buy them as a set. Whether you're taking a watch apart or putting a watch back together, you're going to need hand tools. These particular hand tools here are for putting the hands back onto the watch. You'll also need some pry tools to pry off the hands. Here's an example of pry tools that allow you to lift the hands off the watch movement. You'll notice that this shows a protective covering, and you can buy these or you can use a thick plastic bag, like the little Ziploc baggies. I typically use those because they're always on my bench. But these little plastic protection holders, they come in handy because you're definitely not going to scratch anything because they're so thick. They are difficult to work with. When you're putting the hands on a watch, those nylon tipped holders or hand tools allow you to push straight down onto the hour wheel and the cannon pinion to get the hands seated correctly. There's holes in different sizes of those so that you can get those over the correct part of the watch, the cannon pinion in this case. And you can see that there's a space inside that tool to allow for the second hand post to poke through. Hand pry tools can be kind of expensive, so if you're breaking into this hobby, get yourself a set that's about under $20 to start with, and if you want to move up to a good set, good sets run around $30 to $50. And one more area where not to skimp is if you're using magnifiers. Now, I'm a little older, so I need the magnifiers, and I use between a 2x and a 4x magnifier. These magnifiers are really good, and I would suggest getting yourself a good set. You can get these at Harbor Freight or Amazon. You can get the real good ones on Amazon also, but supply houses do carry them, and they carry very nice ones. So if you're breaking into the hobby and you're going to start working, I would always recommend starting with pocket watches because they're a little larger, easier to work on. You're going to need a very good ultrasonic cleaner, and I would always recommend a cleaner with a heater built into it. And a good ultrasonic cleaner will last you a lifetime. I've had a few of them over the years because I've upgraded, but all of mine still work. I've only had one go bad from years and years ago, and I think that was a relatively inexpensive one. You're also going to want tray baskets, parts baskets, things to go along with that. Also, when you're working with ultrasonic cleaning solutions, you're going to want glass bowls with lids because you're going to keep chemicals in there to rinse off the watch movements as they come out of the cleaning solution. And the lidded glass containers are easier to clean, and the lids also allow for the fluids to stay in there without evaporating. Now, a lot of people always ask, how do you open up a watch? Well, there's so many different kinds of ways to open watches today. You might find that you'll need several different style openers for different manufacturers. Breitling has their own, Rolex has their own, Baume & Mercier has their own. Everybody has their own little case back. So you might find yourself with $1,000 worth of case openers. But for the most part, you can get away with the ones I'm showing here. This is a 2 and a 3 prong case opener for most screw back cases. Or twist off cases. You also need a pry bar to pop off things like Timex watches, which snap together. Most inexpensive watches will snap together. Don't cheap out on some of these tools because the better the quality, the less likely you are to cause any damage to a watch when you're working on it. But if you're changing batteries, you're going to want a good case press. These are often called case back presses or crystal presses. They work both ways. The nylon discs allow you to push tightly down onto a movement or a watch case to snap back the back cover, as well as to press on crystals, especially on newer watches with nylon gaskets. Watch oilers and watch oil are something that watchmakers and watch repair technicians and hobbyists will argue about for the rest of their lives. Now, that was a Burgeon set that I showed you. This is a very inexpensive Burgeon set right here. This set costs like $7, and it's well worth getting if you're just breaking into the hobby. Get yourself some oil cups if you're using multiple oils, which is always a good recommendation. Oilers come in handy, as you'll see in most of my videos. After you start assembling the watch, you do have to oil the jewels or the manufacturer's recommended oil pivot positions. So keep that in mind because the oil is important for the watch to run correctly. Now, you can get these in sets or you can buy them individually, and the oilers are important. They come in 4 or 5 different sizes, and you can buy them in sets of 1 through 5 typically. Some of the oilers do require you to insert the oil into them. Others are dip selected, like this one. You just dip it in the oil tray or the oil cup, and then you oil the points that you have to on a particular watch. The type of oil that you use is going to vary from watch movement to watch movement. Now, I use Mobius oil. That's my personal preference, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who say that's bad oil or that's really good oil. So it's really what you prefer to use and what you've had, experience with. If you aren't happy using one oil, then move on to the next and give that a shot. But don't hold yourself to any particular brand. I'm not brand loyal, so for me, it's whatever oil seems to hold up the best. If I get a watch that comes back, 2 years from now, and the oil seems a little dry, then I can go back and say, what oil did I use on that particular watch, or what oil was I using, and I won't buy it again. So oils come in different viscosities, kind of like car or engine oil, and different manufacturers will specify what kind of oil to use. So if you're unaware of what type of oil, just look at the manufacturer's spec. ETA always posts that on the information about the watch movement. So timing a watch is a function of, and something that's been used for just about 70 years now. We use these machines called time graphers. Time graphers allow the electronics on board to monitor the watch beat, the error rate, as well as its speed rate, and you can make adjustments accordingly. Now, this is an inexpensive time grapher that you can get on Amazon. I have two of them. I have this particular model, and I have a version that's model 1900 that's a little bit better, get a little more detail. I also have some what I would consider to be vintage or antique time graphers that allow me to service more things like pocket watches or antique wristwatches, watches that time at different rates than this machine can use. So you just have to be aware of whether or not you actually need this. If you're working on mechanical watches, I would recommend it, especially if you're working on anything made in the last 45 or 55 years. If you're working on anything older than that, you might want to get a machine that's more specific to that type of a watch. For instance, a pocket watch. Pocket watches had 20 different beat rates between different models and makes, so you want to keep that in mind. Some of these machines will only read 10 or 12 different beat rates from several different manufacturers, so they don't always work for every particular style. Now, these machines start like at $130 and go up from there. I have machines that cost like this one, $130, and I have machines that I've spent literally $5,000-$6,000 on, and I know some of my friends have machines that are actually more expensive. So it really depends on what you need to assist you in the timing of a watch. There are other ancillary tools that you'll need for timing. However, I think you got to keep in mind how detailed are you going to get with your timing and whether or not you have to be. Pocket watches, you can get away with a screwdriver. Rolex, you need special tools. In ETA movements and some Omega movements, you can get away with a screwdriver also. And some other things that you might want to keep on your bench. If you're working on pocket watches and you need key wind pocket watches, it's always good to have a set of keys. They're pretty inexpensive, like $12 to $15. You can buy them individually, but a good set of them is cheaper to buy as a set than it is to buy them individually. I also have both a flex shaft machine and a couple micromotor tools. These allow me to do a little work on polishing, like polishing the crystals. If I have a plastic crystal on a watch that I can't replace, then I can polish it up and make sure that it's nice and cleaned up. You'll also want some buffs and some crystal polish, plastic crystal polish. You can also, get yourself a nice glass crystal polishing kit, but those can be very expensive, and it's probably something you won't get into until you're more advanced in this. One of the other tools that I use a lot on my bench is a Watchmaker Staking Set. I have several of them. I think I have like 4 or 5 of them, and they're all antiques. I have one that's a little newer. It's from the 1960s. However, most of these work with watches that you have that are made today. Staking sets come in handy when you're working and doing more serious repairs on a watch. So in this case, I'm changing the roller table, and this is how I'm using the staking set to reassemble the complete balance. Probably something that you'll get into more if you are going to dabble into advanced techniques. But for the beginner or the guy breaking into the hobby who wants general tools to clean and service watches, you don't necessarily need a staking set. Guys, I hope you liked this video and I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're looking for any of these tools, you'll find them in the description link below. They're also on my Amazon page, which is in the description below. I do make a small commission through the Amazon affiliate program every time you buy something on Amazon. So any of those links, they do generate me a little bit of revenue, probably like 1.5% of the sale price. And that helps to support my page. Again, I just want to say thank you for helping to support my channel, and I appreciate all the views that I get from you guys. You guys make this possible, and I do appreciate it so much. If you are not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button, and if you like this video, again, I'm going to say please hit the like button, that little thumbs up button. That helps my channel grow, gets me more views through the algorithm. You guys have a wonderful day, and happy watch repair.